The stars stretched across the black sky like silver rivers. From a far corner of the galaxy, a group of travelers moved quietly in their shining vessel. They were explorers, gentle in nature, and they came not to conquer but to learn. Their leader, Solon, sat at the front window of the ship, studying the frozen planet below. The world was white and silent. Layers of ice wrapped around mountains, seas, and plains. To the aliens, it looked like a giant pearl resting in darkness. Solon spoke softly to his crew. This planet is called Earth. Long ago, our records showed signs of moving creatures here. But now look at it. The ice covers everything. It seems lifeless. The crew members leaned forward and nodded. To them, Earth looked like a forgotten sphere, abandoned by time. The surface gave no sign of life, only endless glaciers and frozen storms that swirled like slow rivers of glass. Still, Solon felt curious. He had studied many worlds, yet this one gave him a strange pull. Why had this planet once been alive but now stood silent under ice? He ordered the ship to move closer. As the vessel entered orbit, the explorers sent rays of warm energy toward the frozen ground. Their goal was simple. They wanted to melt small regions and see if water, plants, or tiny creatures might return. To their surprise, the ice responded quickly. Huge cracks spread across frozen seas, and clouds of mist rose like soft curtains. The crew gasped. "Look at the oceans," one whispered. "They still hold deep water." Solon's eyes glowed with interest. If the oceans remain, perhaps other things remain too. The ship moved over the continents, scanning with careful eyes. At first, they saw nothing but broken rocks and buried rivers. Yet slowly, as the ice retreated, shapes began to appear. Strange patterns lay beneath the glaciers, lines, squares, and circles that did not look natural. "What is that?" asked a young explorer. Solon leaned closer. "These are not made by nature. These are made by hands." The crew felt a sudden stillness. The frozen world was not as empty as they had believed. They looked deeper, sending beams through layers of snow. The images revealed stone walls, fallen towers, and paths that once connected great cities. The explorers had seen ruins on other planets, but this felt different. The design was purposeful, strong, and full of meaning. Someone had lived here. Someone had worked to build a world, only to be swallowed by ice. Solon placed his hand against the glowing screen. "This is not the end of a world. This is a story waiting to be told." The explorers watched as more ground appeared, more valleys freed from their icy prison. Rivers began to move again, and dark soil showed through the white blanket. Yet even as beauty returned, they wondered about the past. Who were the builders of those hidden towers? Did they vanish before the ice, or did they fall asleep within it? The ship hovered above a wide valley. Something there caught their attention. A small glow flickered against the darkness. At first they thought it was sunlight reflecting on ice, but as they studied it closer, they realized it was fire. The crew members looked at each other. Fire meant warmth. Fire meant life. "Impossible," one whispered. "No being could have survived this long." But Solon felt his pulse rise. "Do not speak too soon. This world may still have a voice." The explorers leaned forward, their eyes wide with wonder. Beneath the frozen veil, something unexpected lived on. The valley carried the sound of crackling flames, and shadows moved across the ice walls. The planet they thought was silent had kept a secret. Solon stood tall, his heart filled with questions. If beings had endured through an age of ice, What kind of spirit must they have carried? He knew in that moment that Earth was not only a pearl of frozen water. It was a world of survivors. The crew grew restless with excitement. They wanted to go closer, to see with their own eyes. Solon raised his hand for calm. We must not rush. We must move carefully. This is their world. We will not disturb it without respect. He ordered the ship to hold its place in orbit while the valley fire continued to burn below. The crew whispered to one another, each imagining the beings who had kept life alive through endless cold nights. Solon closed his eyes and thought deeply. He felt the universe had guided him here for a reason. Perhaps these hidden beings held a strength that even the stars did not yet understand. The ship floated in silence while the ice cracked and rivers awakened. Earth was not a dead planet after all. Earth had endured. And somewhere below, life still waited to be found. The alien ship drifted quietly above the valley where the firelight had been seen. Every explorer on board stared at the glowing spark below. It looked so small against the wide blanket of ice, yet it carried a meaning far greater than any of them could measure. Fire meant survival, and survival meant life. Solon, the leader of the crew, leaned forward in thought. His calm voice filled the chamber. We must learn who lives there. If they can survive through an age of endless winter, then they carry a strength we do not yet understand. The explorers adjusted their instruments. Gentle beams of light scanned the valley, careful not to disturb the world below. Slowly the images grew clear on the viewing screen. The valley was surrounded by high walls of ice, but inside, warm streams cut through the frozen land. Around those streams, small shelters stood, built with stone and wood. The crew gasped softly. The shelters were not empty. Shadows moved within them. The images showed people, wrapped in heavy furs, walking from one fire to another. Some carried water from the streams. Others tended to small green patches under glass frames that looked like simple greenhouses. There they are, whispered one of the explorers. Humans. The word felt heavy in the chamber. They had read about humans in old star records, but most believed that the species had been lost when Earth fell into ice. Yet here they were, moving, working, and alive. Solon's eyes softened with wonder. So they endured. Even when their world turned against them, they endured. The crew studied the humans for hours. They watched how families sat together near the fire. They saw children running across the frozen ground with laughter that rose into the cold air. They observed elders teaching younger ones how to prepare food, how to mend tools, and how to tell stories that carried meaning. These are not just survivors, said Solon. They are builders of hope. Look at them. They do more than live. They create. The explorers had traveled many worlds, yet this scene touched them deeply. On planets with greater resources, whole species had fallen into silence when hardship came. But here, on a frozen world, humans had found ways to continue. They carved shelters, captured warmth, and raised children who still smiled. Solon asked for closer scans. The instruments revealed more detail. The humans had simple tools made of stone and metal. They had bows made of wood and strings for hunting small animals. They grew food under glass frames warmed by fire and sunlight. They used rivers under the ice to keep fish alive. Every part of their life was shaped by creativity. They had no grand machines, no wide cities, and no tall towers left standing, yet they had what mattered most, the will to keep going. One explorer shook his head in disbelief. How could they last through centuries of ice with so little? Solon replied with quiet pride. Because they carry something greater than tools. They carry spirit. The crew nodded. Spirit was not something they could measure with their instruments, yet they could feel it in every image. It showed in the way humans worked together, in the way they gathered around fires, in the way they cared for their young and their old. Then something caught their eyes. In the center of the valley stood a tall wooden pole with symbols carved into it. Around it, humans gathered as if it was sacred. The explorers watched as the people sang softly, voices rising in unity. They could not understand the words, but they understood the meaning. The pole stood as a sign of hope, a reminder that even in darkness, they belonged to something greater. The explorers fell silent as the sound of the song filled the chamber. Though they were far away, they felt touched by the simple harmony. Solon placed his hand over his chest. They do not only survive. They remember. They pass their story from one to another. This is why they still stand. The others agreed. They knew then that they must go closer. To simply watch from above would not be enough. They had to meet these people, to hear their voices with their own ears. Yet Solon was careful. We cannot rush. If we step into their lives without care, we may bring fear. We must earn their trust. The explorers began planning. They discussed how to approach gently, how to show that they meant no harm. Some suggested bringing gifts of warmth and food. Others said they should wait until the humans showed curiosity about the sky. For now, they held their ship high above the valley, watching as the fire burned brighter. The humans did not know that distant eyes were upon them. They did not know that their spirit was being measured not by machines but by hearts filled with respect. As the night deepened, the explorers rested at their stations. Yet none of them truly slept. Each mind was alive with the same thought. The universe was full of grand civilizations, yet perhaps the greatest strength of all was hidden here on Earth, in a valley where humans had endured against every odd. Solon looked once more at the glowing fire in the valley below. He whispered to himself, though his crew heard it too. This world has not ended. It has only begun again. And so the ship waited, silent above the clouds, holding its breath for the moment when two worlds would meet for the first time. The alien ship hovered in silence above the valley. Inside, Solon and the explorers prepared for the step they had long discussed. They had watched the humans for many days, seen their fires, their shelters, and their songs. Now it was time to meet them face to face. Solon gathered the crew. His voice was calm but carried weight. We must go with respect. We must show that we bring no harm. These humans have endured much. Let them see us as friends, not strangers of fear. The explorers nodded. They chose to descend in a small vessel, leaving the great ship hidden among the clouds. Solon and three others entered the smaller craft, which glided gently through the night air. They carried no weapons, only small gifts of warmth, crystals that glowed with steady heat, and containers of fresh seeds from their home stars. The vessel landed quietly at the edge of the valley. Snow rose softly around it, sparkling in the moonlight. The explorers stepped out, their forms tall and graceful, with silver eyes that reflected the firelight in the distance. They moved slowly, careful not to startle the humans. Near the river, a group of humans noticed the strange glow. They froze in surprise. A young woman named Myra stood among them. She was strong of spirit though small in frame, with dark hair tied back by a strip of fur. Myra stepped forward while the others whispered behind her. Her people had lived many generations under the ice, and they had learned to face the unknown with courage. Solon raised his hand in a gentle greeting. He spoke in his own tongue, but the words carried kindness. Myra could not understand the sound, yet she sensed no danger. She placed her hand over her chest and bowed her head slightly, showing both respect and caution. The explorers exchanged looks of wonder. This simple gesture was enough to tell them that humans understood the language of peace, even without words. To build trust, Solon opened a small container and revealed one of the glowing crystals. He placed it on the snow, where it gave off a warm light. The humans gasped softly as the ice around it melted, leaving a patch of bare ground. Myra bent down to touch the crystal. She pulled her hand back in surprise at its warmth, then smiled with amazement. Solon felt relief. The smile was a bridge between worlds. Myra turned to her people, speaking quickly. Though the explorers could not understand her words, they could hear the excitement in her voice. She was telling them that the strangers had brought a gift of fire. Some still looked afraid, but others stepped closer with wide eyes. Solon then revealed the seeds, holding them out on his open palm. Myra studied them carefully. Seeds were precious to her people. She understood at once that these small things carried life for the future. She accepted them with care, placing them against her chest as though they were treasures. The air between the two groups grew lighter. Fear gave way to curiosity. The humans invited the explorers closer to the fire at the center of the valley. It was a cautious invitation, but it was enough. Solon and his companions followed slowly, making sure each step was gentle. As they entered the circle of light, children peered at them from behind their parents. The elders watched with deep, searching eyes. Myra guided Solon to sit near the flames. She pointed at the fire, then at the glowing crystal, as if to say both gave warmth. Solon nodded and smiled. He pointed at the seeds, then at the soil near the river, showing how they might grow. Myra's eyes shone with understanding. The night became a lesson in gestures. The explorers touched their hearts when they wanted to show kindness. The humans tapped the ground when speaking of their home. They drew shapes in the snow, pictures of rivers, mountains, and stars. Slowly, though no words were shared, meaning passed between them. One elder lifted his voice and began to sing softly. The song rose into the cold air, carrying notes of strength and memory. Myra explained through gestures that it was a song of survival, sung by their people through the long winters. Solon listened with awe. Though he could not understand the words, he felt the weight of every note. It was a song of courage. In return, one of Solon's crew brought forth a small sphere that projected light into the sky. With a soft hum, stars appeared above the valley, bright and near. The humans gasped and lifted their heads, seeing constellations they had never known. Myra's mouth opened in wonder as she traced the shining shapes with her finger. The two groups sat together until dawn painted the ice with gold. The humans had not run in fear, and the explorers had not pressed too far. Trust had begun, fragile as a new flame, yet strong enough to keep burning. As the sun rose, Solon stood and bowed his head to Myra. She mirrored his movement, hand pressed against her chest. In that simple moment, they both understood something deep. Though they came from different stars, they shared the same desire, to endure, to grow, and to find hope even in the coldest of times. When Solon returned to the small vessel with his crew, his heart was filled with quiet joy. He knew that this was not the end of their meeting, but only the beginning of a story that would reshape both their worlds. The valley glowed warmly as dawn touched the edges of the ice walls. The humans moved with gentle steps, carrying water, feeding fires, and tending to the green houses under glass frames. Their lives were simple, but every action carried purpose. Solon and his fellow explorers watched quietly, learning with every glance. That evening, Myra invited them once more to sit near the great fire at the valley's center. The flames danced high, painting light on every face. Children sat close to their parents, and elders gathered with calm dignity. For the first time, the humans and the visitors sat not as strangers but as companions who wished to share. Myra began by lifting a carved stick from the ground. Symbols ran along its surface, and the way she held it showed that it carried meaning. She pointed at the fire, then at the sky, and finally touched her chest. With her other hand, she drew the shape of a circle in the air. Solon leaned forward, studying her gestures carefully. He sensed she was telling a story. The elder beside Myra joined in. His voice rose deep and steady, a chant that carried through the valley. The words were unknown to Solon, but the tone spoke of memory and endurance. As the elder sang, Myra used her hands to explain. She pointed at the ice, then covered her arms as though shivering. She showed how her people had hidden inside caves, carried torches, and huddled together. The story became clear. The humans had lived through winters longer than memory, through storms that swallowed the land. They had not waited for rescue. They had built fires, carved shelters, and kept one another alive. Solon felt moved. These people had faced a trial that would have ended many other beings. Yet they had not surrendered. They had carried forward the flame of life, passing it from one hand to another like the torch of their story. When the chant ended, silence filled the air. Then the humans clapped their hands against their chests, a gesture of pride and remembrance. Solon and his crew copied the movement, showing that they understood. To return the gift, Solon brought out a device no larger than his palm. With a touch, it projected images into the air. Stars appeared once again above the fire, but this time he shaped them into patterns of his people's history. He showed the long journeys across the galaxy, the peaceful colonies on distant worlds, and the great lessons they had learned from other species. Myra and the humans stared with wide eyes. For them, the stars were distant lights in the night. Now they could see them close, connected by lines of meaning. Solon pointed to Earth on the glowing map and then drew a path outward, showing how it was part of something vast. Myra's eyes filled with wonder. She pointed at the stars, then at herself, then at Solon. The meaning was simple: we are part of this too. The fire crackled, and the two groups sat in quiet thought. It was clear to all that though they came from different places, they shared the same heart. Both carried stories of survival and journeys of hope. Later, the children came forward, curious and bold. One touched the glowing crystal of warmth and laughed at the soft heat. Another pointed at the seed container and made a gesture of planting. The explorers nodded, showing how the seeds would grow into tall plants that gave fruit. The children clapped with delight, and their laughter echoed through the valley. An elder then stood and began to speak. Though the words were unknown, Myra helped explain. He told of how the people had sung songs during the darkest winters. They sang not only to remember the past but also to give strength to the future. The songs were promises that life would go on, that even if the cold grew heavier, the spirit inside would remain bright. The explorers listened with deep respect. Solon thought of his own people, who had lived with comfort for many centuries. They had knowledge, ships, and endless energy. But he wondered if they would have carried such courage in the face of so much loss. He whispered softly to his crew, "We came here to study life. But we are not only studying. We are learning." The humans and explorers shared food that night. The humans offered roasted roots and dried fish, simple meals that had kept them alive. The explorers, in turn, shared sweet fruits from their ship, glowing softly like jewels. Myra tasted one and smiled, her eyes shining as though she had never known such flavor. The valley became a place of exchange. Not just of food or gifts, but of meaning. The humans offered stories of fire and spirit, while the explorers offered knowledge of stars and journeys. Each side gave something the other did not have, yet each side felt richer than before. As the fire burned low, Myra looked at Solon. She placed her hand on her chest, then extended it toward him. It was a gesture of trust. Solon returned the gesture with deep sincerity. That night, as the explorers walked back to their small vessel, Solon looked at the valley one last time. He saw the fires glowing, the shelters standing strong, and the people who had endured through ages of frost. He spoke softly, more to himself than to the others. Their story is not only about survival. It is about spirit. That is what keeps them alive. The ship lifted gently into the night sky, leaving the valley below. But in Solon's heart, the fire of humanity's story burned brighter than ever. The great ship floated quietly above Earth, hidden by soft clouds that drifted over the frozen land. Inside, Solon and his crew gathered to reflect on what they had seen in the valley. The memory of human songs, their fires, and their unbroken spirit still echoed in their minds. Solon spoke first, his voice steady but full of thought. We have traveled many worlds. We have seen cities made of crystal, oceans glowing with light, and beings who shape matter with ease. Yet what we saw here is something greater. These humans endured with little, but their strength is beyond measure. The others nodded. They remembered the children's laughter by the fire, the elders' chants, and Myra's eyes filled with hope. These images were stronger than any record of machines or power. One of the younger explorers asked quietly, how could they last so long when others would fall? On some planets, entire species vanished after smaller hardships. But here, through centuries of ice, they lived. Solon placed his hand on the table. Because humans carry something that cannot be measured. They have spirit, and with spirit they create. They find ways to make warmth, ways to grow food, ways to pass their stories forward. Spirit is the reason they are still here. The crew fell into silence as they considered his words. They had always believed that knowledge and technology were the highest forms of strength. Yet Earth had shown them something new. Knowledge can break. Tools can fail. But spirit, once lit, can survive even the darkest winter. Later that day, Solon returned to the valley with his smaller craft. He wanted to spend more time learning directly from the humans. Myra welcomed him once more, and together they walked along the river where thin sheets of ice floated on the surface. Through gestures, Solon asked her how the people had survived when the ice storms were strongest. Myra knelt on the ground and drew pictures in the snow. She showed caves deep inside mountains where families had lived together. She drew circles of fire to show warmth, and small shapes of plants under glass frames. Then she tapped her chest and pointed at her people. Solon understood. It was not only caves or fires that had kept them alive. It was their will to remain together, to share hope, and to never give up. The explorers later joined the humans in their daily work. They helped carry water from the streams, though the humans laughed gently at how awkwardly the tall aliens moved across the uneven ground. They watched as children learned to mend fishing nets with patience. They saw how the people used every part of what they had: bones for tools, skins for clothing, wood for fuel. Nothing was wasted. That evening, an elder told a story around the fire. His voice rose and fell like the rhythm of waves. Myra translated through her hands and expressions. The story told of the first winter, when the ice came suddenly and the sun grew faint. Many feared it was the end of all life. But one family built a fire that never went out. They shared it with others, and from that fire a whole community grew. Solon listened with awe. The story was simple, yet it held a truth greater than any star chart. Survival was not only about strength. It was about sharing the flame with others so that no one faced the cold alone. When the story ended, Solon rose and spoke in his own language. The humans could not understand the words, but they felt the respect in his tone. He told his crew, "This lesson must be carried to the stars. Our people must know that true strength is not measured by wealth or machines, but by the courage to endure together." The crew agreed. They realized they had come to Earth thinking they were teachers, but instead, they were students. Humanity had given them a gift far greater than the seeds and crystals they had shared. Humanity had given them an example of resilience. Before leaving that night, Solon placed a glowing crystal at the base of the wooden pole with symbols. It was his way of honoring their spirit. Myra watched with soft eyes and placed her hand over her chest in thanks. As the explorers lifted back into the sky, Solon looked down at the valley once more. Fires glowed like stars on the ground, and voices rose in song. He turned to his crew and said, "When we return to our people, we will not only tell them what we saw. We will tell them what we felt. We will tell them that humans are not a forgotten species. They are a lesson for all who travel the galaxy." The ship carried those words into the night, as Earth slowly thawed beneath the touch of time and light. The explorers knew they would never see their journey the same way again. The sun rose slowly over the valley, spilling golden light across the melting ice and flowing rivers. The humans moved with quiet purpose, tending their fires, planting seeds, and caring for the young. Above them, the alien ship hovered like a silent guardian, its crew watching with wonder. Solon decided it was time to deepen the connection. He wanted the humans to understand that they had come as friends and not as distant observers. In the smaller vessel, he descended once more, carrying gifts of warmth and small tools from their home worlds. Myra was waiting near the river. Her dark eyes brightened when she saw him. She motioned for him to follow, leading him to a small circle of fire where children gathered around their elders. The humans had begun to trust these visitors, but they remained cautious. Respect had to be earned. Solon knelt by the fire and offered the glowing crystal once again. This time, the children reached out eagerly, laughing as the warmth spread across their hands. The elders smiled softly, seeing that Solon's gesture was not only a gift but also a promise of goodwill. Myra picked up the tools Solon brought and showed how they could be used to plant seeds and build simple shelters. She laughed as she demonstrated, her joy echoing across the valley. Solon watched carefully, learning not just how humans worked, but how they thought. Their methods were clever, practical, and always guided by care for one another. Throughout the day, humans and explorers worked side by side. Solon helped lift small logs to reinforce shelters, while Myra guided him on where each log should go. The children showed the explorers how to catch fish from the stream, teaching patience and focus. Each action, no matter how small, carried lessons that went beyond survival. As night fell, the valley glowed with fires and soft laughter. Myra gathered the humans and explorers around the largest fire. She spoke in her language, pointing to the sky, the rivers, and the valley itself. Through gestures and expressions, Solon understood that she was telling the story of their survival and the lessons learned over generations. One elder joined in, adding gestures of his own. He showed how they had kept their spirit alive during the coldest winters, how families had shared warmth and food, and how songs had carried hope when the sun barely rose. Solon listened, recording every detail in his mind. He realized that humans had survived not only because of what they had built but because of how they had cared for one another. The explorers shared knowledge of the stars in return. They projected images of planets, galaxies, and distant worlds, showing humans how life could exist beyond their frozen planet. The children stared in wonder, pointing at stars and planets with wide eyes. Myra's face reflected amazement as she traced the paths of distant comets and glowing suns. The bond between the two groups grew stronger. Humans learned that the visitors could bring warmth, knowledge, and friendship. The aliens learned that humans carried something far more powerful than technology or skill, a spirit that could endure the harshest conditions. Later, Solon spoke quietly to Myra. He pointed to the sky, then to his chest, and then gestured toward the humans gathered around. Myra smiled, understanding that he meant the bond between their peoples was more important than anything else. She nodded, placing her hand over her heart in return. That night, as the fires burned low, the humans and explorers shared a simple meal. Roasted roots, small fish, and fresh fruit from Solon's gifts were eaten together. Laughter filled the valley, mingling with the crackle of the fire and the soft wind over the rivers. For a moment, all worries of ice, hunger, and hardship seemed far away. The elders sang again, a song of endurance and hope. This time, Solon joined softly, echoing the rhythm and melody. The humans smiled, recognizing the gesture as respect and understanding. Children danced lightly in the snow, tracing patterns of firelight as the night sky stretched endlessly above. When it was time for the explorers to return to the ship, Myra led them to the edge of the valley. She touched her chest and then extended her hand, a gesture of trust and friendship. Solon mirrored her actions, sealing the bond they had built. As the small vessel lifted into the sky, the valley below was alive with warmth, light, and life. The ice had begun to melt, rivers flowed freely, and the fires of hope burned bright. Solon looked down and felt a deep sense of pride and respect. Humanity had shown strength, creativity, and kindness that even the stars could admire. Solon spoke softly to his crew. They are more than survivors. They are teachers. Their spirit will guide us as much as our knowledge can guide them. We have learned what endurance truly means. The explorers returned to their main ship, carrying with them not only memories and records but also a new understanding. Trust had been built, and a bridge between worlds had been formed. The humans watched the ship disappear into the sky, their hearts filled with curiosity and hope. They had learned that they were not alone, that other beings in the universe cared for life and respected the courage to endure. Above the clouds, Solon smiled. Earth had proven its strength, and in the bond between humans and explorers, a new story had begun. One of shared hope, mutual respect, and the knowledge that even in the coldest of times, friendship could flourish. The ice of Earth continued to melt, revealing rivers, valleys, and plains that had not seen sunlight for centuries. The valley where Myra and her people lived became brighter with every passing day. Streams flowed freely, green plants sprouted in the thawing soil, and animals cautiously returned to the open land. Solon and his crew had spent many days observing and learning from the humans. Each time they returned to the valley, they felt a growing respect for the simple, strong life that had endured against every challenge. One morning, Myra gathered her people near the largest fire. She spoke with gestures and expressions, explaining that new land had become ready for planting. Elders nodded, children laughed, and families moved with purpose. It was time to rebuild and grow beyond the small shelters hidden beneath the ice. Solon descended in the smaller craft, carrying seeds, tools, and lessons from other worlds. The humans watched as he spread the gifts across the soil, showing them how to plant quickly and care for the young shoots. Myra helped guide him, making sure every seed found its proper place. The humans worked together, side by side with the explorers. The elders carried knowledge from centuries of survival, teaching methods for building shelters, preserving food, and collecting fresh water. The children learned new ways to explore the rivers and forests, combining curiosity with care. Solon observed quietly, filled with admiration. They have endured the harshest winters. Now they will face the new world with the same courage. He spoke softly to his crew. Every generation of humans carries a fire that cannot be put out. Today, that fire grows brighter. As the sun rose higher, Myro led a group to plant the first crops in the newly thawed soil. The explorers helped, carefully tending to the fragile seedlings. The humans taught them which soil held the most water, which plants needed warmth, and how to shield them from sudden storms. Every small action carried a lesson, every gesture showed care. The humans had learned not only to survive but to thrive. They built simple irrigation systems using streams from the mountains, crafted greenhouses from ice and stone, and planned new homes that could stand against both sun and rain. Solon and his crew marveled at the ingenuity. This was not just survival. This was life restored with creativity, courage, and community. By evening, the valley glowed with warmth and light. Fires burned at many points, and the sound of laughter carried across the rivers. Myra and Solon stood together near the largest fire, looking at the people who had endured so much. Solon spoke softly, gesturing to the humans and then to the sky. He meant that their strength was now visible to the stars, and that their story of survival would inspire beings beyond Earth. Myra nodded, understanding that humanity had not only endured but had become part of something greater in the universe. The explorers prepared to return to their main ship. They had spent long weeks on Earth, learning, helping, and sharing. Solon looked once more at the valley. He saw humans planting, building, and laughing. He saw children exploring the thawed forests, elders teaching, and families sharing warmth around fires. Humanity had proven that even in the coldest, harshest conditions, they could endure and grow. Myra stepped forward, placing her hand over her chest and pointing toward the sky. Solon mirrored her gesture. The meaning was clear: respect, friendship, and understanding had been shared. The main ship lifted gently into the sky. The humans waved and watched as it disappeared among the clouds. They had learned that other beings in the universe respected life, cared for endurance, and celebrated hope. In return, the explorers had learned that true strength was not measured by power or technology, but by courage, unity, and spirit. As the ship drifted away, Solon whispered to his crew, "We came to study life, but we leave inspired by spirit. Humanity is a story the stars should remember." Below, the humans continued their work, carrying on their lives with renewed energy. Fires burned, seedlings grew, and laughter rose into the thawed sky. Myra looked at the river and the fields, then at her people. She spoke softly to herself, "We endured the ice. Now we will build a world that can endure too." The sun set over Earth, casting long shadows across the valleys and rivers. The explorers disappeared among the stars, carrying stories of hope and courage. Humanity had survived the Ice Age, and now, under the warming sun, they would step forward to shape a new world. The valley glowed softly as night fell. Fires burned on the ground, stars shone above, and humanity's spirit rose higher than ever. In the quiet of that moment, the universe seemed to listen. It seemed to understand that strength is not only in what can be built or measured, but in the courage to endure and the will to thrive. And so, Earth began a new chapter. Guided by hope, friendship, and the lessons of its survivors, humanity stepped forward into a world reborn.